Good afternoon, and welcome to our second annual discussion on media ethics entitled Social Media on Ice. My name is Sonia DePalma, Assistant Professor in the Department of Mass Communication, and I will moderate today's media ethics discussion. Before we begin, please make sure you have silenced your cell phones. Thank you. It is fitting that this year, the title for our panel is Social Media on Ice. We live in a publish then filter society. Anyone can publish via Twitter or Facebook. Perhaps on the upside, we get real-time reporting on events, brand updates, product launches. We even get to see customer service complaints. We also see personal details that reporters usually do not divulge, now self-posted on Twitter and Facebook. With individuals directly publishing, we have many versions of the day's events. So ethically speaking, just where does that leave us? Here today, we have 4 panelists who will discuss the role of ethics in media as well as social media. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Howe, an account executive with the Daniels Group, a regional marketing and communication services firm. He counts the Biltmore Estate, GE Lighting Solutions, Party Hospital, Handmade in America, and the Asheville Chamber among his clients. Jeff is a 1994 graduate of UNC Asheville's Department of Mass Communication. He is also past president of the local affiliate of the American Advertising Federation. Rebecca Sulak, co-managing editor of the Arts and Entertainment section of the Mountain Express. Rebecca has worked for some of the largest papers in the Carolinas, including the Charlotte Observer and the Herald. As Twitter sources go, Rebecca prides herself as one of the most up-to-date sources for local news and events. She graduated from UNC Asheville in 2000. Justin Bellamy, a native of Western North Carolina and a 2005 UNC Asheville graduate, he recently launched JB Media Group, an internet marketing agency located in downtown Asheville. Justin also co-owns Asheville Now. And Jay Deacon, a 15-year veteran of radio broadcasting, he most recently served as program director and afternoon host of 105.9 The Mountain and ESPN Radio 1310 and 970. In 2009, he founded Wildfire Media Partners, a mobile marketing company. The goal of this program is to nourish your sense of media ethics and to better prepare you as media consumers and producers. Please join me in a round of applause for our panelists who have volunteered their time today. We will begin with some general questions, followed by questions relevant to each of our panelists. Then we will conclude with questions from our audience. But first, we'll open with our discussion with a short clip produced by our commercial media workshop students.
What is a tweetastrophe?
A what?
A tweetastrophe.
I don't know. A what? Tweetastrophe. That's a new one. I actually don't know that one.
Tweetastrophe? I don't know anything about tweeting or Twitter. I have no idea what a tweetastrophe is.
I have no idea. Something on Twitter?
Honestly, I don't use Twitter and I don't twat.
I've learned about this. I just started Twitter again. A tweetastrophe is when there's something on Twitter and it causes lots of catastrophes.
It sounds like, though, if I may infer, when one makes a fool of thyself on Twitter.
Okay. So, I'll ask our panelists, What tweetastrophe have you experienced or witnessed a colleague experience?
If I could start maybe with that. People seem to, and it may not be exactly a Twitter thing, but you know, a lot of times our business when in the radio field is to entertain and sometimes polarize. I can think of most recent example that we did on 105.9 The Mountain was the status update was, congratulations, Amy Winehouse, 10 days sober. Of course, this was 10 days after Amy Winehouse died. So you can see some moans and groans in the room, but at the same time, you see a couple of people going, okay, that's actually pretty funny. I just don't want to be caught laughing in front of people here at UNC Asheville. And that's sort of the mindset of it, is because it turns into what you call a tweetastrophe. All of a sudden, there was backlash. There were people who were like, oh my God, that's so tasteless. You people are horrible. And at the same time, there are people who get it, people who understand that we're simply here to evoke a response at some point and to basically be memorable. More than anything else, being irrelevant seems to be maybe the worst thing you can do. Sometimes some negative backlash mixed with the positive and letting people in the field and your Twitter followers fight it out is probably our goal sometimes in the media when we're trying to invoke a response.
Thanks, Jay. I have an example. It's not personal, but I've heard of this as a good case study from a media professional that I saw speak a few months ago. It was an example from General Motors. They had a young social media professional who was using Hootsuite from their phone, and they were, you know, tweeting for General Motors, you know, with a major account up in Detroit. And driving home from work, the young employee was in traffic and was logged in on his phone and tweeted something along the lines of, these effing drivers in Detroit don't know how to drive, and put it out, and intended to put it out on his personal Twitter account, but it went out to the General Motors Twitter account. And needless to say, not only was he fired from his company, but his agency was fired from a multi-million-dollar account with General Motors. So I guess that would be a pretty big tweetastrophe, to say the least.
A major tweetastrophe.
Yeah. There's another, he used another example after that one of a similar problem that was then turned around into a positive. And I don't have the exact quote in my head, but it was a similar scenario where a young social media expert was tweeting for I believe it was I'm trying to remember the exact tie-in, a Red Cross campaign, and it was a campaign that, a partnership with an alcohol brand. I can't remember which brand it was, but put out something similar at a party. They were drunk and they tweeted about being at a party and being, I think the word was slizzard or something along that line, like a made-up slang word for being intoxicated. And the Red Cross kind of went with it. They kind of rolled with it and made like a meme out of it and turned it around. And I don't remember the exact story. I wish I did. I wish I had more information. But it was an example of, the first example ended up being a true catastrophe for the company and a PR nightmare for them. And the second one, the Red Cross kind of rolled with the punches. And it was an example of how mistakes are going to be made on social media. And if you can learn to roll with the punches, you can typically, it's really better than trying to overreact. Something like that.
I think that's a good point. We at mountainx.com, we have certain hashtags that we follow, and those tweets get sent automatically to our homepage. At first, we were doing that in a somewhat unmoderated capacity, and we discovered that was maybe not the best idea because you would get a lot of comments that weren't necessarily appropriate for your homepage on your homepage. So we've experimented with a variety of formats, and we found that there are certain people that we consider to be, citizen journalists and self-publishers, and people go to city council meetings, and people are just out on the street, and their tweets get sent to our homepage automatically. But it's definitely, it's been a learning process over the past year. But the thing about a tweetastrophe is that not everyone is on Twitter. Not that many people comparatively are on Twitter. So what you may think is a huge deal. Oh my God, I tweeted that when I was drunk or something like that. Not necessarily going to be as big a deal as you think unless it gets sent to like mountainx.com homepage.
I've yet to experience a tweetastrophe, so
Okay.
sorry.
That's quite all right. It's probably might be a good thing.
That's a
Probably
good thing. I did say so far.
Okay. Our next question. Is social media killing journalism? How can we differentiate between ethical practitioners and non-ethical reporters, broadcasters, or advertisers?
Rebecca, you seem to be the most
Yeah,
qualified.
no,
Why don't you
definitely.
start?
That-
No, I don't think social media is killing journalism at all. I think for us, it's been a big help because for us, we are covering local news. And so the more people we have out there using social media that we can tap into, the better it is for everybody. If we can bring, Facebook, if we can bring Twitter to our site, if we can get people out there, it's really been useful for us, just as insofar as taking as many different sources as are available and putting them all in one place. MountainX.com has become something of a clearinghouse for that information, and we're working really hard to make it as user-friendly and personalizable as possible. But for us, I think it's only been a good thing. You have people out there, now they have tools that they never had before, but a lot of people had interest and aptitude, and we haven't had a problem with people misrepresenting events or being unethical so far, which has been really nice. It's been a big experiment, but for the most part, it's worked out really well.
I think it's important to, as like broadcast groups and management especially, which we've served in capacities of, it really starts to make you question who you're in bed with, so to speak, when it comes to being partners, when it comes to producing journalism. They're the journalists themselves, such as Rebecca's organization, or people who are out there gathering sources and actually creating the stories. In broadcast, your partnerships are a lot more important. It used to be you just cared about, playing the Led Zeppelin records and talking to your audience and trying to be compelling and entertaining. And now when something breaks, something like a major fire or a horrible traffic accident or whatever the case may be, because your audience, it's a race now. All of a sudden, what used to be your specialty of just playing music and just being entertaining has now become as important to relay news and information to your audience, which used to not be your job at all. And so I think from an ethics standpoint, it's probably made a lot of people grow up, I think, in terms of their business, because A, you gotta care who you're in bed with when it comes to getting those sources and getting the information right, and B, being able to rise above it and realize what's important as yourself when you used to not even have to care about that 10 years ago.
Okay. I'd like to interject that the questions that we have today are due to my media ethics class. I'd like to thank those students who gave me some topic ideas that they would like for our folks to elaborate on today. Our next question. Oh, Justin,
I was
go ahead.
going to just jump in for a brief second on that one. I think that I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a journalist, but what an observation that I have of the journalism field is that one of the challenges the journalism field is facing these days is the attention span and the amount of information that people are being bombarded with. And really, quality, in-depth journalism requires a lot of time, and what you end up creating is something that's a long form and investigative in nature. And the average, especially people of our generation, don't have the attention span for that type of content. And I just finished a 5-month editing process on a video. It was a documentary. It's a commercial piece, but it's an educational documentary, and it came out at 5.5 minutes long. And 100% of the feedback was that it's too long. And the purpose of it is a web, so it is a little bit long for the web, but we told the story in as a concise manner as possible, and we had 17 hours of footage to boil down, and 5 minutes seems to me like a reasonable amount of time to expect someone to watch a video. And we're going to run with it at the 5.5 minute mark, but really, it probably would have been a lot better for the average audience at a 2.5 minute length, and that's not a lot of time to say, tell a whole story. So I think that's one of the challenges that journalism faces right now is the ability for people to publish quality content themselves and become authoritative sources on their own, in their own right. And then on the flip side of that, the average attention span and the amount of information people get hit with on a daily basis.
How many people here think that they probably read, when they're going through their news aggregates or whatever, how many people here probably think they read more than 300 or 400 headlines a day over the course of a day? Maybe less than that? Less than 300 maybe? How many people here can read? All right. I read somewhere a couple days ago that the average person, once you're sort of in the world working and you're just blowing through news, somewhere around 800 headlines a day through average course of readings, whether you're reading through HuffPost or Wall Street Journal or whatever the case may be online, 800 headlines a day, and you're probably clicking on maybe 1% of those, which at the end of the day is maybe 8 stories. Anybody ever read more than 7 or 8 paragraphs into a story at all?
About 1 or 2.
How many people read about 1 paragraph, kind of get the gist of what the story's about, and move on to the next story? So, it's exactly what Justin was talking about. It's that short attention span. And I think to some extent, I'll tell you from a professional world, if you want to spend your time, working really hard and getting 7 or 8 or 9 pages deep, and getting all the facts right and making sure the story's perfect in an ethical world, that's a great thing. But in the real world, it's 2 sentences. It's a 140-character world. Give me the story. Give me the first paragraph. I know what I'm talking about. I got that part right. And move on with the story, because that's all people are really consuming when it comes to creating your news for the most part.
And if I can just jump in here, can you guys hear me? I think that probably makes Rebecca's job even harder because of that short attention span. You've got to make sure that the sources that you are using, I know you have many, many more sources nowadays, but they've got to be factual and they've got to be trusted. And that's where I'm afraid that we're gonna see a breakdown of the journalistic integrity that most news sources and news outlets used to have when we start just taking the word for someone who came out on Twitter and said this is the way it is. How do you balance that?
Well, we definitely don't. As far as investigative story goes, we wouldn't just take someone's word for it on Twitter, just as we wouldn't necessarily just take someone's word for it on the phone, or it's the same concept, just new tools. I mean, you talk to people, you verify, you use documents. I mean, all those things go into a story. Where I think Twitter has been helpful for us as far as breaking news goes. For example, when the building caught on fire, that the firefighter died inside recently, we had the whole community was concerned about that event, and people were tweeting, Biltmore Avenue is shut down, it's still shut down, there are flames coming out of the building. I mean, it was a way of having a lot of different eyewitness accounts versus, we weren't retweeting reports about what was actually happening inside because nobody really knew that, and that's where our reporter was talking to the authorities about what was going on. So, you have to balance those 2 sources, but it can be done.
So that leads me to the next question. What ethical responsibility do you believe you have on how your work impacts society?
It's a big responsibility. I mean, you're talking when you get the kind of traffic that we get for our website, and when you have the readership that we do, you still have to verify your facts. I mean, social media is not going to change that. You can't just take someone's Twitter account of something and take that as fact. And we don't do that. And I don't think anyone is doing that at this point, any legitimate news source. It's just another tool that we have for gathering information, and it's very useful for that. But our responsibility as far as being accurate is still what it's always been, and I don't see that changing.
You'd say probably your credibility. Credibility is credibility, and if you're right, people consume your media. If you're wrong and people aren't benefiting from it, at the end of the day, you're just losing your audience. Would you say that, would you say that Twitter, though, and some of those leads that people tweet, is that helping sort of snoop out stories a little bit more for you guys?
Yeah, I think, for West, there was a lot of crime going on in West Asheville, and we were having people sending us either direct messages or, just tweeting, go check this out, and you can do that, and that's cool. But we've spent 20 years building the reputation that we have, and one thing about reputation is if you make one false move, it's gone. So 20 years of work to build our credibility You know, that's not something that we're going to be compromising.
As far as what I do, being that I own an agency where we do media relations and actual content creation for clients, it's a challenge to try to determine where to draw the line, because really it comes down to who I'm comfortable working with and working for, and balancing the my desire to work with companies that I believe in strongly. You know, like I would personally support their message and their efforts with the need to be profitable and to bring in enough money to pay the people who I've hired. And so that's a struggle that I deal with almost every day. And it's sort of a line I have to draw on a client-by-client basis, where I have certain clients where I may not agree with their overall business practices, but if I can steer them in a direction of, you know, utilizing more local resources or doing things that are aligned with what I personally believe in, then I feel like if I'm even making a small dent, then I'm doing a good service, because they're going to hire someone, and if they think we're the best for the service, then, you know, I have definitely turned down work because I didn't agree with the company, and I definitely actively, both externally and internally within like my own intention of what kind of clients I want to attract, think about trying to attract clients that align with what I believe in. I try to hire people who are at least, you know, up to my ethical standard, or what I consider, you know, even more passionate in terms of their ethics than I am, and that's important to me, to build a team around me that I'm confident that like they'll keep me in the right direction and going in the right direction as well as a company. And one more thing, you know, being that you know, developing this company here in Asheville, and a large part of the value that my clients see is actually in the social media presence that I maintain. In other words, I have an Asheville Now Facebook page with 10,000 fans. I have a Twitter account with over 2,500 followers, and I have a personal Facebook account with over 2,000 friends. And those are actually, there's actually some media and monetary value in all those accounts, and that actually sometimes is inherent in the contracts I sign with clients, and sometimes it's written in stone. Like, yes, I will promote your content on my pages, and therefore I have to even pay more close attention to the kind of clients I'm comfortable working with, because they're going to expect me to promote them. And then I have to, you know, it's sort of like I'm putting my own reputation and my own, you know, personal brand, I guess is one way to put it, on the line. So, yeah, it's something I think about a lot.
I just want to add, and maybe Rebecca can chime in. They have such a great repertoire of people who are talented and nimble and able to sort of get the story right. And you've heard a lot about that up here, about, you know, making sure that there's credibility and there's ethics involved. Don't lose sight of the fact, though, that being first does matter. And some people will say, oh, you know, but I want to be right. Well, being right and being first is how you get the bigger job. It's how you get the bigger office. It's how you move to the next city and move into the bigger markets. Being first and being right are the two things that you have to do. And so never lose sight of the fact that being first is still a really important thing. Some people want to wait and make sure everything's right. And if you wait too long, you know, it's a 140 character world moving at the speed of light. In fact, faster than that these days. At some point, you know, the consumers out there are going to find the story when it's time to find it. If you're looking on your Twitter for the right feed or for the right news story or the right link to get to what you want to find right now in this on-demand world, you know, and somebody else is trying to get it right and trying to figure out and make sure it's 110% right, you know, sometimes, you know, they're late to the game and somebody else is right and first, and that's what matters sometimes.
Check your name spellings, always, before you tweet.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question crosses all platforms: print, radio, advertising, social media. How do you know what is really appealing to the public? And do you differentiate between what's appealing and what's ethical?
I think you got to talk what people are talking about. Regardless, I mean, there's always what's trending on Twitter. How many times I look at what's trending sometimes and I think, I don't know 90% of this stuff, and yet I read 800 headlines a day. Why do I not know, some of the things that are trending on Twitter? In broadcasts especially, one of the rules of the morning show, it doesn't, you have what you like and you have your audience's lifestyle, but at the end of the day, even if you're on a rock station talking about American Idol or talking about what happened last night, even if people hate American Idol, you have to predict what's going to be happening around the water cooler every single day. Last night, a great baseball game is on between the Tigers and the Yankees, and yet Monday Night Football, a very inconsequential football game between Tampa Bay and the Colts, doubled the share in the Nielsen ratings of that baseball game last night. And so you have to kind of figure out what it is people are really talking about, and that's what you have to talk about. Because if I'm not talking about what you care about, what do? You change the station, you move on to the next website, and you just move on.
Well, we're lucky that we have a 80-page paper and we have a website, so we can kind of hit on both of those things, because you want to obviously give people what they want, and sometimes what they want is a little more sensational than, you want to give them news also and things that may be more useful to them than, say, Amanda Knox getting freed. Those things they're sort of the story of the day. But when it comes right down to it, is that going to affect your life? Is it going to help you decide who you elect to be your leader, to make decisions for your community? And we're very interested in giving people the information they need to make those decisions, because we believe in this, this area, and we want it to stay strong and be healthy. But at the same time, if you don't also give people fun stuff, then they're not going to tune in.
You guys create content that people do talk about. You force the conversation sometimes. A great article. How many people here today maybe have talked about the city council race that's coming up here in a week, a very important city council race. Anybody watch Dancing with the Stars last night and Chaz Bono? It's sort of the what are people talking about sort of mentality, and so. It's good when you have great content providers who can force the conversation sometimes, and Rebecca's right, there's a little bit of both of that, and you guys have that luxury of being able to generate the conversation sometimes, to be the conversation starters.
Well, it's like when we used to work at the Daily, we called it making people eat their spinach. It's like, this is good for you people, come on, you want this, but they don't actually want to eat it, so you have to... It helps to disguise it as something that tastes better than spinach. If you look at our city council election package this week, we worked really hard on the design for it. We used a lot of color. I should have brought a copy. I didn't bring it, but hopefully you'll pick it up somewhere. And the idea being that, okay, these people may not necessarily be interesting to you, but if we can make them look a little snazzier, maybe you'll get involved.
And one of the things they did, if you haven't seen it, I really highly encourage it, because I spent my Saturday morning reading it. It was fantastic because it gave me, somebody who's only been in Asheville a couple of years, it gave me 140 character description, so to speak. One good, here's what you stand for, everybody gets the same questions, but it was a fantastic piece, and encourage you guys to vote next week in the election. But
I paid him to say that, by the way.
Yeah, a prime example of them, A, starting the conversation, but B, making it work for the audience and the way that people consume media.
And I guess where Rebecca is giving people their spinach. Mostly what I do is giving them their candy. And it is about what people are talking about. That subject matter really does make a difference in how we present our clients, whether it's in print or telecommunications or broadcast or whatever it is we're doing for them. What else is very important is how the message is said, and I think you got to have your pulse on how people are talking, not necessarily what they're talking about, but how they are putting those messages out, and that's pretty important to my business at least.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about a couple of things here. Personally, I don't consume a whole lot of traditional media. I consume a lot of social media, and something that was really interesting last week. This is just an anecdote, but I thought it was really odd. I think it was the end of last week, where I took a good 5-minute glance at my Facebook stream, and it was an extreme polarization of information between funny memes like cute pictures of different things and jokes, and Occupy Wall Street. It was entirely alternating between little kittens and cute little piglets and really intense visuals of people being drugged across the street and beaten and on the Occupy Wall Street campaign in New York, and that was really like kind of eye-opening, I guess, and just intense kind of experience of social media, because it was citizen journalism telling a story that was at the time being somewhat undercovered by traditional media, and they were really breaking an interesting story, but it was alternating between that and just completely carefree social content. So on another front, as a marketing agency of sorts that focuses on online marketing, what has changed in the last 10 years since I started doing this, and it started when I started, and it's become even more refined, is being able to target marketing to audiences based on what they're interested in. And give 2 examples of that. With Facebook advertising, how they make most of their money, and they're actually making a lot of money these days, Facebook, is you can really target your advertising directly to your audience. So I can say, okay, I'm doing a campaign for a bachelorette party, for instance. I can say, show this ad only to 19 to 27-year-old women who live in these 5 states who are engaged. And it'll tell me, Facebook will tell me within less than a second exactly how many people that is, exactly what the average cost is going to be for that click, and estimated traffic. And that's amazing targeting, that you can do that. And I can change that ad every 5 minutes if I want. I can change the target, I can change the demo. And with another example, a real world example, that was a real world example of a campaign we're launching in January, but we have a campaign. I have my biggest client, my father's company, does holistic travel, and recently, we're just tying along with what's going on in the media. So CNN recently did a hour-long interview with Bill Clinton, who recently went vegan, and he lost 25 pounds and reversed his heart disease. And we happened to have on my father's annual event the top 3 doctors that Clinton used as keynote speakers this year. And so on Google, I'm running an ad for my father's company that only shows up if someone's looking for any of those 3 doctors' names, or Bill Clinton diet, or Bill Clinton vegan. And if any of those things show up, which is about 3,000 times a day, those things get searched. Our ad's the only ad that shows up because no one else really cares. Like, we happen to be in that niche, and we're the only one in that niche. And so for 10 cents a click, I can get 500 people to my dad's website in a day. And that's really cheap for online advertising. For $70 a day, he's doubled his traffic, and these people are booking because they want to come learn from the same doctors that taught Clinton how to change his life. So it's an example of how you can really, in this world, you can figure out what people are interested in, and you can target, marketing materials to them. And that, I think it'll just become increasingly more possible as these technologies become more and more delineated.
How many people have their Facebook updated to the new timeline already? Show of hands. Have anybody moved to their Facebook to the new timeline? The new look of Facebook? Show of hands. Raise them high. It's okay. Not to be embarrassed that you guys are nerds. It's cool. How many people flipped out when they started doing the timeline a couple of weeks ago and said, I hate Facebook? I was one of those people. Yeah, right? Everybody was like, well, what you're going to see in the next couple of days, especially when it comes to Facebook, it is going to be big-time news. Your Facebook is going to look so much different than anything you can possibly imagine. And if you don't like change, you're going to throw your hands up and say, I'm not going to use Facebook. And 2 days later, you're going to log on to see what's going on. And you basically boycott it for about 2 days. And it goes to what Justin just talked about. Facebook is evolving because in 3 months, you don't even remember what Facebook looks like today. It's evolving because they're tracking every single thing you do. I saw status updates. Please hover over my name and disconnect, subscribe, or something along each of my friends' names last week. At the end of the day, it's the internet. Everything you do on the internet is public record, and that's the way it's always going to be. And you guys have grown up in a generation to where you understand that it's part of who you are and your culture. And so what Facebook does in the next couple of weeks is changing everything. Today, I commented on a story about Hank Williams Jr. and his comments about the president yesterday, and all of a sudden, all the ads in the right, as soon as I hit enter and my comment posted, automatically said, you like Hank Williams Jr.? Buy his new album, you know, and I'm thinking, well, no, that's not exactly what it was all about. But Facebook is moving that fast because they're making a lot of money in advertising. And at the end of the day, you guys are the product. We're all the product of Facebook. We're bought and sold to advertisers like Justin, to McDonald's, to Honda, to whatever the case may be. And so I think the sooner we get used to that, the more we'll, you know, maybe be a little bit more reclusive about exactly what we put out there on the internet.
Yeah, we had an editorial cartoonist this week. He did a cartoon, and it was about, you know, the different frames of local officials doing various things that were upsetting to some people. The only thing that really got people upset last week was Facebook changed their format, and everyone's like, oh, my Facebook changed, oh God. And it's like, your taxes went up, your home got foreclosed, you know, it's like, no, my Facebook changed. That's the real problem here. But it is interesting. The Occupy Wall Street thing, I really feel like, is the biggest example of, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I worked for a corporate newspaper. We didn't actually have a homosexual agenda or anything that we were following. There was no list of stories that we were not allowed to cover. There was no discussion in the morning about, oh, these, you know, people are having this freaky protest, let's not cover it. It wasn't like that. So I don't believe in that sort of thing, but I did not understand why I was not seeing coverage on Occupy Wall Street. I was on New York Times, I was on the sites that I go to, and it's just like a footnote if it's there at all for the first few days. It was very strange to me. Meanwhile, my Facebook is blowing up with this stuff. So I'm like, what is going on here? I mean, it was very weird. But that's an example of social media is covering an event that's happening. I don't understand why traditional media wasn't at first, but they weren't. And that's huge, you know? And then it blew up across the country. It started happening in other towns, and it's still going on. So, I mean, that's a big strength of social media.
I think it's because, you know, the New York Times, the Wall Street Post, they have a bottom line at the end of the day, and Wall Street pays a lot of that, and advertisements and the money. At the end of the day, social media, like Rebecca says, is going to supersede that because it's pure at the end of the day.
Well,
but
it's just hard for me to imagine that conversation happening. Let's not cover this, you know? I mean, how could you not cover it if it's... I don't know. I'm still... Somebody needs to look into this, okay?
The conversations I have are, before we go to air with something, is, you know, what advertiser in Asheville is this going to piss off at the end of the day? And we have to think about that. And at the end of the day, if the answer is, you know, Harry's Chicken Shack, well, guess what? His $450 he spends a year is worth more than than worth all the trouble. And at the end of the day, don't go to the air with it. And that's the realization of it. At the end of the day, it's about getting the money. It's so hard for media companies to get the money. That's what it's about. And I love, you know, what's right and what's ethical, but you wanted a job and you want to stay employed by the man, get the money.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think I've been really fortunate to work in places where that was not happening. Or if it was happening at a higher level than what I was participating in, you know. I mean, I'm not saying, like, especially at Express, and we are a free paper, so we have, you know, we're funded by our advertisers, but at the same time, if an advertiser, you know, sometimes an ad rep will come into my office, you guys really doing this story or you're doing this review, and we're like, you need to leave my office because this is the editorial department, not the advertising department. And we're really lucky to have a publisher who is just like, there is a line, do not cross it.
And that's a great thing, and it's a great resource for this community. It used to be like that in broadcasting and in radio. A program director used to be able to just care about the content. My morning show needs to be edgy. My morning show needs to be funny. You know what? If there's a catastrophe, that's okay. A little bit of bad press isn't such a bad thing as long as people are talking about us. My former position here in Asheville, the first line it says is that the scoreboard is measured in revenue and what kind of money you can generate as a program director, and has nothing to do with the ratings. You know, the conversation is always about the money, and that's the business we work in. You know, so it's a fortunate thing that the Mountain Express and your advertisers are all very good. You know, they respect that. I think as a consumer of your media, you know, I respect your advertisers, and I look at them and I think, you know what, they're all in line with what you guys are doing. And sometimes, you know, agencies who buy, you know, cost per point or whatever the case may be, or cost per thousand, you know, they're just there to try to reach the biggest amount of audience until you say something that may offend their client, and then the buy is gone and the money's gone, and you're in somebody's office, you know, getting chewed out.
That makes sense.
So Jay, one of the questions the students have, do you ever get a say in advertising as a broadcaster?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things is, especially in broadcast radio and commercial radio, 25% of the hour is commercials. You know, one of the great things I think that revolved around my most recent employer, and I always respected this, is that they have somebody whose sole job is to write creative and funny commercials. Because at the end of the day, we watch the Super Bowl because the commercials are entertaining. The next day after the Super Bowl, a lot of people talk about the commercials. A lot of people are surfing the internet looking to watch those commercials again. And so when 25% of your hour is commercials, and you hear a bad commercial on your radio station, whether somebody mixed something up, or it's not funny, or it's inaccurate, or it's just boring. Stop boring everybody on my radio station. That's really where you kind of get in. And so I like to work with advertisers, and a lot of that now, as we've kind of started venturing off into our own business now, is I do a lot of freelance commercial writing, and I tell the advertisers, the first thing I say is, stop talking about yourself. It's not about you. Nobody cares. You can't pass the who gives a crap test. So please entertain the masses, whether it's, you know, a 30-second commercial about orthodontics. We just had a client come in who, I mean, how many people want to hear a 30-second commercial about how great I am at putting on your braces and how special it is to wear? No! You want somebody making fun of a kid who got a bad job doing his braces and, holy tin grin, Timmy, what's wrong with your face? You look like you're going to fight some evil robots. You know, and making people laugh, because at the end of the day, that retention that comes with knowing who's going to do the job right is really what's selling braces and getting people to go in to see this orthodontics. So, yeah, I think the untweeted answer is yes, we have a say in advertising.
Okay. Rebecca, is there a tipping point between the amount of advertising and the amount of stories for the Mountain Express so that the paper doesn't become an ad pack, so to speak?
We maintain a consistent ratio between advertising and editorial within our pages. So we have 80 pages a week. We have a certain percentage that are always stories and editorial content, and a certain percentage that are ads. Sometimes we get last-minute ad sales, which lets us put more content into the paper. We don't run, we don't mess with that ratio very much, because obviously our advertisers are interested in us having a quality product, and we are interested in having a quality product, and our publisher is interested in having a quality product, and our publisher has never been very interested in making money. And that may sound odd, but he has historically operated the paper with a break-even business model, which is not a very good business model. Don't do that. But we got a business manager finally a couple years ago, and he came in and he said, you can't keep doing this. It's not a good thing. But what he has done is taken every bit of profit that he makes and put it back into the company, either hiring more staff or more equipment. And that has worked out really well for the growth of the paper. A couple of years ago, when the economy dropped out, it didn't turn out to be such a good thing because there was no reserve. And that's why we hired a business manager to come in. But before then, for 17 years, the paper operated without a business manager, and it just worked. And that's what Jeff Phobes is fond of saying. I don't pay attention to numbers. It just needs to work, and it works. So I don't recommend this approach necessarily, but it has worked out. I think Asheville is a really special community in Western North Carolina, and we have a really symbiotic relationship with our advertisers. We don't have very many national corporations at all. It's primarily people who believe in what we do. And it sounds very and it sounds a little cheesy, but it really is true, and it's worked out for us. So as far as being an ad pack, I'm not exactly sure what an ad pack is, but we have a consistent ratio of content to advertising, and that's not going to change.
Jeff, how is advertising different from Mad Men?
It's a lot different from Mad Men, which I don't watch regularly. So if I get any of this wrong, someone please correct me. I deal with ad agencies every day in my business, and obviously that show is based on a certain agency and a certain time and era. error. And ad agencies they don't operate like that. They operate more as a business and less as a frat house. And there are still, I still have agencies who I can go in, and if it's late in the day, they can pull open their bottom drawer and reveal a bottle of scotch. But that's definitely not the norm. And I don't think it's going to be. I don't think that day's coming back. If it was ever here to start with, those kind of behaviors are not what's going to get you ahead in business. It is unethical to do some of the things that I've seen and heard about on that show, and in order to get ahead in business, I think you're going to need to have your own sense of what an ethics, what it is, what yours are, and how you're gonna post those to every bit of thing that you do in the world, not just in your job. But it is very important to act in accordance with those internal ethics. And I guess you're either going to have them or you're not. Fortunately, you've got classes like this at UNCA that kind of help you talk through those things, because they are on a ethical dilemmas happen daily, and I don't think you can cloud those with raunchy behavior, and I think that's just television.
I just want to say at Wildfire Media Partners, we still drink a lot. We're good. We try to keep that tradition alive.
Okay. Justin, how lucrative is the social media market, or how lucrative have you found it to be?
Well, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a minute. I think that my company I've been doing, so let's put it in perspective. Facebook and Twitter are about 6 years old, and really, I graduated UNCA 6 years ago, and I didn't have a Facebook page, a profile when I graduated, and within about 2 years, I got one, and then I started realizing that it was the way, marketing was going. So I tried to figure out how to develop a service that was repeatable and sellable as a service for clients, and I think I've done that with my company, and we provide social media management for a number of clients, and it's possible to pay above a living wage for people who are skilled in creating good quality content, to create content for clients and charge a rate that is profitable on that service, and we've done that so far, and I can expect that to just become increasingly in demand. I also foreshadow the need. The news, the headline last week that really tipped my attention. I get a really good weekly newsletter from a local ad agency that's heavily social media focused, and there was a headline in there that really piqued my interest because it's relevant to the people in this room, and that is that there's a significant uptick in the number of companies hiring social media professionals, and that word, the term social media professional, is kind of a little bit. It's such a new industry that it's hard to say, am I a social media professional? I like to use the example every time I speak. I use the Malcolm Gladwell example from the book Outliers. And in his book, he lays out a scenario where you need to study something and practice something for 10,000 hours to be an expert at it. And if you think about, any professional athlete, any professional musician, professional writer, or any other industry, that's 5 years of full-time practice or 10 years of half-time practice. And no one has 5 years of full-time experience in social media because it's only 5 years old. And so, and it's changing so fast that like he was just saying a minute ago, Facebook's going to be different next week than it was this week. And really what I see as the value that we provide to our clients is that it's our job to stay on top of the changes. And maybe it's frustrating a little bit for us when they change, but then again, if, as an office, last week when Facebook changed, we spent 3 or 4 hours talking about the changes in the office, and by the end of the day, we had pretty much figured out how to approach the new Facebook. Client might call us the next day and say, Facebook's changing. I'm like, yeah, well, we're on it, and that's what we provide as a service. And something new comes out, Foursquare picks up momentum, or, some big change in social media comes along, our clients are going to call us and they're going to be like, how do we approach this? And we were like, we have a strategy for you. And that's what we provide as an agency. And I think that companies who want to have more control than that external service provider, that want to have more say in how their social media is run, will want to hire people who know how to do it. And I foreshadow another shift as bandwidth becomes more accessible, and as cell phones, the 4G network's coming to Asheville this fall, and if we get a real true 4G network, it'll change the game in terms of live video streaming capabilities. What I'm seeing is, in the next couple of years, a true need for multi-talented, multimedia, kind of a hybrid. I mean, like an incredible, diverse number of skills required by these small companies for, needing employees that can do video and understand audio and understand social media and can write and communicate in a professional way. And those are, that's a kind of a hybrid between a multimedia and a journalism degree, which I think it will emerge as an educational opportunity as the industry demands it. But I think people who are looking ahead a little bit and seeing that double major, or a combination of personal study and internships on those fields, will create a diverse skill set that will be really in demand in a couple of years. And I was really happy to see that UNCA changed their multimedia department to new media this year. Very excited about working with students in that department, and in the future, helping them develop a program, or help them, having my company be available to, provide a platform for people to learn some of those skills as well. So I hope that answers the question.
And he makes a good point. When we hire people in the broadcast business, those were the skills we had to have. You had to be able to shoot video, to go backstage and you're interviewing a rock band. It's not about just what you put on air anymore. It's about being able to shoot the video. A couple of things, if you guys are taking notes. There's a book by Steve Stockman called How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck. Check that book out. It's great. It's like 2 years of film school in a great read book, and it'll teach you how to make better videos. And Justin was talking about his 5-minute video earlier that he thought. At the end of the day, it gets down to like about a 1-minute, 2-minute video is all you can keep people's attention span for. And then a website called Magisto.com. I don't know if anybody's used that website yet. Magisto.com. Essentially, you upload all your clips, up to 16 clips, put a soundtrack to it and a title to it, and within 45 minutes, its algorithms pick out what's important. If it's your kid's soccer game, if it's a party you were at last Friday night, it picks out the faces, it picks out the action, the storyline, and it creates literally about a 65-second movie of your experience that's enjoyable for the user to watch.
Wow. Let's open our questions to the audience. Who would like to be first to ask a question to our panelists? We'd ask that you use the microphone towards the front. Okay.
Making an alliance with ABC. As far as we're talking about conglomeration in our class. Is that a major conglomeration, or is that not so major? And a college student such as myself in the field, trying to get into the field, is that making it harder competition?
Go ahead. Well, I had a conversation about that same kind of merger on Friday night, I believe. It's a matter of, I think those types of mergers, Comcast, NBC, Yahoo, ABC, are examples of internet companies merging with video content companies, trying to get get their head around the shift in television media, which is happening, and in video media. And I don't think it hasn't shaken out yet, because there's a lot of things at play, and I don't think anyone can really predict where it's going to go, because there's an element of federal legislation in terms of net neutrality that is still unclear where it's going, and then there's elements of just bandwidth challenge, and the access to bandwidth, access to high quality internet connections that will continue to evolve in the next couple years. But I personally believe that as those big players at the top shake out, there's an opportunity at the bottom for allowing individual companies, individuals with content to share, to start streaming video onto the web. And I'm actually working on a project right now, a media project, to kind of create a community-based television network online. And it would utilize existing streaming company capability like Ustream and Livestream.com, but just sort of create the layer of organization that will allow for people to find quality content and publish quality content. So I think that those sort of partnerships, those sort of large mergers that the FCC has now pretty much given a lot of leeway in, it's going to create a situation where there's going to be a lot of strain on the federal government to break net neutrality and to allow ISP companies or internet providing companies to limit what their downstream can access. And basically what that comes down to is companies competing with Netflix, Hulu, and the other video streaming companies competing for viewership based on who the ISP is. And that's something I haven't done a ton of research on, but it's a very significant issue, especially if you're trying to figure out how you fit into that in terms of being approaching graduation and trying to figure out how you fit into the media market.
You have Yahoo, which is a failing company, which has fired their CEO, which hasn't been able to keep up, is losing money. And essentially it's about what we talked about earlier, who you're in bed with when it comes to content providing. ABC provides great content. Yahoo wants ABC's content. ABC wants Yahoo's audience. It's a good partnership for what they're trying to do.
Another question from the audience.
We have answered every question involving social media that exists. Well done.
We are amazing.
We are good.
Okay.
There we go.
Let's see. Let me look at my
You got
crystal
one,
ball
Sonia?
here.
Sonia, you got one?
Oh, we have one. Oh, great.
Okay. Actually, for those of you who are video producers and going, in the mobile direction, you mentioned the 4G. With companies like Comcast and AT&T throttling networks for the higher end users, the people who are streaming the videos, how are you as website providers, those type of producers, dealing with that kind of aspect of the business?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but I'll kind of hit on a little bit. I mean, they're kind of gobbling up each other and really clamoring for it. At the end of the day, content still is king, and so if you're producing and you're making content, at the end of the day, make it relevant and make it entertaining, and it goes back to stop boring people. In that book I referenced by Steve Stockman, How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck, there's actually a chapter dedicated to how to shoot a viral video. And how to, what kind of elements that go along with it. And so maybe, like I said, I don't know if I understand your question, but if your content is good, it'll cross all bandwidths and be able to spread maybe.
I meant more along the lines of if you are a video producing site, say Netflix, or if you're a newspaper who is now like, hey, here's live video. If I access that from my mobile phone, and I'm watching that. Well, say I'm on AT&T. Once a month they're going to go, hey, you're accessing too much. You're using our network too harshly. So we're going to throttle you and make that slower, which is going to make me stay away from video streaming sites. That seems like it hurts you guys. Do you guys have a plan to combat that, or are you just going to allow that to happen? How does, I'm curious what the social media world is going to do with companies like Comcast, AT&T, throttling the heavier users.
I mean, I think for what we're doing right now is not so much live streaming video. We do that occasionally with events that we feel like are significant enough for that. But for the most part, our video is, we try to keep it short, and we haven't had a problem with people accessing it, or it hasn't been an issue so far. And if we start getting that kind of volume and those kinds of folks interested, then I think that we would re-examine. But at the moment, things are working the way that we want them to work.
And I think the free market will help dictate that. T-Mobile is kind of famous for that. They kind of jam your service a little bit when you start using too much. I think AT&T does as well. But you start to see that in this market. AT&T is not a great signal provider in a lot of areas in this market. And a lot of people bailed on AT&T as soon as the iPhone became available on Verizon. So I think to some extent the free market kind of works those things out a little bit. If somebody's providing me on an unfiltered video where I can get what I need, it's an on-demand world, and cash talks.
I mean, that's a question that I don't have an answer to really, but I ponder it a lot because, I mean, currently, might be a shock to a lot of people, but I actually use my Android phone as my internet connection at my apartment. I don't want to deal with Charter, and that's just the truth. And so it's a 3G, and it's kind of slow. It's a 1.5 megabit down, 300 kilobyte up. It's not really that fast, but I can work from home. And actually, get this, I used my phone a couple nights ago to watch through my PC the video from the panel last year to prepare to speak on this year's panel. And it took me, I don't know, maybe a half an hour to buffer it, and then I watched it straight through for the full hour without a buffering issue. And the 4G network is going to be almost 10 times faster than the 3G network if it's actually up to the speed at which they're claiming. They're claiming up to 12 megabit down, even 15 in some cases, and up to 6 megabit up, which is incredibly fast uplink potential. And but then again, there is that issue of I'm not throttled right now. There's no limit on data on my current plan with Verizon. But when I switch to the 4G and sign a new contract, I'm going to be signing onto a contract that has a cap. And I've looked into the cap, and I've done the math on how many hours I could stream on it, because up and down, because I'm really interested in streaming up off my phone. I'm interested in creating a situation where I can have a MacBook Pro and my phone in downtown Asheville and a camcorder, and I can be streaming live onto a network, onto a localized television network. And that's where I think that the video media is going. I think people, take an example of, like any of the recent protests that have happened, or any of the, the parades. There's a lot of stuff going on downtown that gets covered after the fact using photographs or some video that was edited after the fact. But I think that having video streaming live from those type of events is going to be the future, and it's already happening on Occupy Wall Street and examples like that around the world. So, New York already has the 4G network. So, that's a great question, and I think that what he said about the consumers will drive. If consumers continuously get throttled, someone will emerge who'll have a better data plan, and then they'll switch, and then they'll compete, and the quality will increase over time. And I think that's and it'll be I've looked into it. It's going to be expensive for me to stream.
Okay.
Using a phone. It's going to be after I hit my limit, it's going to cost me $10 an hour to stream up. But if I'm charging the client $30 an hour or $50 an hour for the coverage, I think I can make that work. So,
well, I think we are out of time. I'd like to give a heartfelt thank you to our panelists and to our audience for their participation today. And finally, in the words of a successful pizza chain manager, remember, the only way to put out a social media fire is with social media water. Have a great day, and thanks for coming. And if you'd like to speak with any of our panelists, please come down front.